afternoon, Jets Nation. Graham, the G Show Forsyth here, and ready to get set for an all-new edition, well, into it now, of Season 1, Episode 18 of the Jet Fuel Podcast. Should be an interesting one. A lot to talk about today. The Winnipeg Jets, of course, set to take on the Colorado Avalanche in Colorado for Game 4 at 1:30 p.m. Central Time coming up. That's under 50 minutes from now. If puck drops exactly at 1:30 p.m., of course, sometimes they drop it a bit afterwards with the national anthems and all that. But yeah, this episode, as always, brought to you by Make Canada Fasteners and Tools, your one-stop shop for all your industrial needs. Be sure to check out their store locations in Brandon and Winnipeg today. Terrico serving Manitoba producers for over 80 years in the agricultural industry. Be sure to check out their website at terrico.ca for more information. And for Make Canada Fasteners and Tools, of course, MakeCanadaFasteners.shop, and Two Goaltenders, your goalie's personal video review service. Be sure to check out their website at GordyTumilsonGoalies.ca for more details on them, on what they do. But yeah, as the poster permits, what we're going to be talking about today, well, what I'm going to be talking about today is this series so far between the Colorado Avalanche and the Winnipeg Jets, your favorite team. Where do the Jets go from here? What do they do from here? As well as a look at the rest of the series going on in the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs and predictions for the rest of how this series will go. I believe I predicted the Jets in 6. Do I still think that? Well, stay tuned to find out, Jets Nation, on the Jet Fuel Podcast here on gshow.ca on G Show Productions, presented by Make Canada Fasteners and Tools, Terrico, and Goaltenders. And, yeah, let's get into it right away. So, the Jets take game number 1 of this series 7-6. They proceed to lose the next 2 games 5-2 and, of course, 6-2 on Friday. If we take a look at the analytics so far for how this series has been going. One sec. Pull up Make Canada Fasteners and Tools. But yeah, I mean, if it weren't for Gorgiev in game number 1 laying an absolute stinker, the Jets could most likely be down 3-0 in this series. As you can see, the play from this team analytically has gotten better in terms of puck control, creating chances 5-on-5 as the series goes along. And as you see, the high-dangered scoring chances, the shots against, they've been limited in terms of the chances that they're giving up in those areas, and especially in game number 3, the most recent one, that was the best display of defense from the Jets. They're not really allowing much in the middle 5-on-5, but of course the problems for the Jets ended up being in the third period on that game 3 and that 6-2 loss. Colorado scores 2 power play goals, and yeah, the Jets took so many penalties. You know, some of them were they penalties. I think that, you know, the reffing has sometimes been questionable, not just in this series, but in every single series throughout the NHL playoffs. But at the same time, you know, the Jets got to find a way to stay disciplined in this series. That was one of the keys heading in that I pointed out. And as you can see, you give Colorado time on the power play. A double minor was, you know, the Jets survived the first half of it, but giving up a power play goal there. And I feel like just the amount of power plays that Colorado was getting, you know, the goals that they scored on it really did open things up for them, and the wheels did fall off, as the old saying goes, for the Winnipeg Jets. Now, Connor Hellebuyck, a player that's supposed to be an X factor for the Jets, he hasn't been able to be that X factor, or he hasn't been that X factor, right? But I don't think Connor Hellebuyck has been the overall problem in this series. When you take a look at that game too, yeah, there was the blunder with him playing the puck, but overall, I mean, Connor Hellebuyck, the game's probably way more lopsided in terms of the chances Colorado started putting up on the Jets, and have put up on the Jets in many of these games. Like, even though Hellebuyck is letting up, you know, I believe it's 15 goals now in the first 3 games. Like, he is getting swarmed, and this Jets team isn't able to contain this Colorado Avalanche team. So the X factor isn't there for the Winnipeg Jets. They're in the box way more than you need to be against a very skilled Colorado Avalanche team. And the fact of the matter is that their best players are outplaying the Jets' best players. Now, I have liked what the first line has been bringing. As you can see there, they've been leading the way offensively. The top duo for this Winnipeg Jets team of Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor. Gabriel Velarde, a point per game player as well. But it's that second line that, needs to get going. And I think they started to a bit more last game, of course, scoring one of the only 2 goals that the Winnipeg Jets had. Josh Morrissey, of course, he's been a stud on the back end for this Winnipeg Jets team, a bright spot at least. But yeah, this second line, Nikolai Ehlers and Tyler Toffoli, I believe both averaged about 12 minutes of ice time in that Game 3 loss. Monahan had about 15 minutes. He was playing on power play, of course, PP1, I believe that's why. But yeah, overall, those guys haven't been up to their usual standard. And overall, I mean, the scoring has run dry since that first game. Georgiev has settled down, and the Avs have settled down and have upped their game every single game. Now, there's been times where the Jets have controlled play in the Avalanche zone, but it hasn't been consistent throughout games like we've seen from the Winnipeg Jets against the opponents that they played against this season for the majority of things. Now, the Jets did sweep the Colorado Avalanche in the season series, but time and time again, the NHL playoffs being something a bit different, right? Like last year, Colorado, the defending champs, they're playing against a team that has their only second year in the NHL in the Seattle Kraken. Maybe a bit of a cup hangover for the Colorado Avalanche. They weren't clicking at the same rate. And they go out in 6 games this season. You got who is the best offensive team, one of the best offensive teams in the league in Colorado, back again. They finished 3rd place. Bit of a slide to end the season against one of the best defensive teams, well, the best defensive team in the league by the facts, by the stats, in the Winnipeg Jets in the first round series. And we're seeing a cup caliber team who has cup caliber players that have won a Stanley Cup, elevating their game against this Winnipeg Jets team, when this Jets core, this group of players that we haven't been able to elevate their games so far against the top end talent, against the Colorado Avalanche. And that's been a huge difference so far in this series in terms of puck retrievals. I think I heard yesterday on Sportsnet, or on Friday on Sportsnet, in the pregame of this, Colorado ranks first in that regard in the league in terms of tracking those down, and you've seen that come to the forefront in this series so far, in my opinion. But in terms of the ice time for these players so far, I mean, no question the top pairing should be getting that amount of ice time for sure. Here's where I start to have a problem, is Neil Pionk getting 23 minutes of ice time. I don't think that should be the case. Now, to be fair, Dylan Samberg has not been that good in these playoffs. He's had his ice time limited, though, and I just feel like if you want to get your lineup going, you got to start playing, I feel like, your second line more in a game like Friday, where I felt like that second line was, playing pretty good, but at the same time, on the penalty kill quite a bit, so I feel like that affected things. And yeah, it's just been frustrating to watch overall, because it's just been evident so far that the Colorado Avalanche have been the faster team, the team that's been quicker to pucks, the team that is dictating most of the play 5-on-5. It's shifted, I guess, a bit, and I feel like Game 3 especially, the Jets played probably their best 5-on-5 game of these Stanley Cup playoffs so far. It's just, you take that amount of penalties against Colorado, they get 2. All of a sudden, it's 2-goal game, and the wheels start falling off. The Colorado crowd getting into it, being loud, and the pressure is on for the Winnipeg Jets now. This is a must-win game today. You lose this game, you're in a lot of trouble, even if you're coming back to Winnipeg, a place where historically in the playoffs in 2.0 history outside of 2017-18 haven't been very good at the Canada Life Center, once known as the MTS Center Bell, MTS Place, a bunch of different names it's gone through. But yeah, it's a must win today. The Jets need to find a way to raise their game, plain and simple. And I know that the reffing's been inconsistent, but you really need to find a way to limit your penalty minutes against this Colorado Avalanche team. And hey, honestly, the power play hasn't looked that terrible in these playoffs so far. We've seen some good movement so far on the PP from the Jets, which I think is a very good sign. But yeah, Alexander Gorgiev has settled in. This Avalanche team has settled in and has raised their level. Can the Winnipeg Jets do that now? It's something that they haven't been able to do in recent years. I'm really hoping that they can. Hoping that, the depth can come through for the Jets, maybe get something going, but it's going to be on these top guys. And honestly, not even on the first line, but can that second line find a way to get things going? Honestly, we'll take a look at the line combinations coming up here, but yeah. I'll talk about what the Jets, I guess, need to do coming up to have a chance to extend this series, to win this game today, game number 4, and then we'll take a look at the rest of the playoffs, and then I'll have my predictions for this series, the Winnipeg Jets and the Colorado Avalanche, coming up in just a little bit here. You're watching the Jet Fuel podcast on gshow.ca, on G-Show Productions. Thank you for being here. We'll be back in a few moments here, everybody. Stick with us. Welcome back, everybody, to the Jet Fuel podcast. I'm your host, of course, Graham, the G Show Forsyth. Happy if you're here. Happy to be here myself. And yeah, it's 12:53. Jets Avalanche game number 4. Puck drops at 1:30 p.m. Central Time on Sportsnet. Of course, going national for these playoffs. And yeah, game number 5, I believe, is Tuesday. So in 2 days' time, and could very well be the final game of the Jets season. Hopefully not. Hoping that it's different than last year. It's kind of like deja vu right now. I'd say that the Jets played even better in game 1 last year compared to this year. But yeah, what a thrilling game 1 that was. No matter what side you were on. I mean, it was rocking. And hey, Pat McAfee shouting out this Winnipeg Jets fan base, this organization. I feel like that's huge, and he's doing wonderful things. I feel like for the game of hockey down there in the States, where it doesn't really get the coverage I think it deserves on places like ESPN, who literally bought the rights to talk about them and to cover the NHL, right? But aside from that, this Winnipeg Jets team, they'll be in Colorado again this afternoon. Of course, the wheels fell off on this team, up 2-1 until they imploded in the third period, getting into penalty trouble, a double minor in there. Kind of set things in motion on the Colorado power plays. And yeah, you could really see just it became a deflated Winnipeg Jets group, and honestly, a deflated post game for me. It was very tough to see it again. The Winnipeg Jets letting another lead slip away like that and getting outplayed again. And what do they need to do to extend this series to get back in control of it, to have it 2-2, coming back home on home ice on Tuesday? Well, I think that, you know, everything aside, you need to raise your level as a team. Like I've talked about already, Colorado has been faster than this team overall to getting in pucks, and it's really hemmed the Jets in their own end. I think especially the puck management throughout the first 2 games from the defensemen, I think it got a bit better where they were a bit more patient going D to D, but so many failed breakout attempts. They weren't hitting the wingers, and a lot of flips into the neutral zone or trying to force it up the left side, for example, where everything was clogged up. I feel like the Jets, as much as they were getting hemmed in, weren't doing a great job of trying to open up the ice. And I feel like it got a bit better in game number 3, like we've shown before, like I've shown before in this podcast. Like, the 5-on-5 numbers definitely did get better for the Jets ever since game number 1, which is crazy because that's the game the Jets won. But I feel like that's a credit to Alexander Gorgiev, who stepped up big time, right? So I think that, yeah, the Jets need to find a way to up their level, and I think a great way in doing that is you got to try to get your speed going, because this Jets team has speed, and dump and chase can be good. I mean, your forecheck is one of your strengths, but at the same time, Colorado's been so good on the puck retrieval. So I wonder if Rick Bowness makes any adjustment in terms of the transition game for this Winnipeg Jets team. I think that in terms of the goaltending situation for this Winnipeg Jets team, matter if you have Hellebuck or Brossoit in the net, I feel like the result is the same, and maybe a bit worse if you have Brossoit in net. Let me get this straight. I think Brossoit is fantastic. He's an amazing backup goaltender, but I don't think he'd be doing better than Connor Hellebuck. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe if they put Brossoit in, I'd be proven wrong, but I don't know. I just feel like you look at Connor Hellebuck, yes, he's led in 15 goals. He has an 8.71 save percentage, but he's doing everything he can. He's made sequences of saves where he's made like 3, and the team is failing to clear the puck away. So I think that defensive details need to get better in front of your goaltender. If you're going to play a more defensive style against Colorado and just try to survive, then you got to be much cleaner with your execution in your defensive zone in terms of knocking away rebounds away from the front of your net, as well as trying to connect on that first pass, right? Because even though the wingers have failed at times to get those passes, they haven't always been the best delivered to them. But the only reason I would honestly put Helly on the bench, and I do it in this game, if you go down 3-1, I feel like you ride with Helly no matter what. And the Jets probably are today. We'll take a look at the line combinations. I saw that Logan Stanley is coming back in, and that Axel Jonsson Fialbi is coming back in for the Winnipeg Jets today. But one sec as we pull it up. Daily line combinations. Top 6 staying the same. Axel Jonsson Fialbi on the 4th line. Logan Stanley with Nate Schmidt in for Brendan Dillon, of course, because, oh yeah, Brendan Dillon, a scary incident at the end of that game against Colorado in game number 3. But yeah, Hellebuck will be getting the start today. And yeah, I mean, this would be the game, I feel like, one of these two where you would go to Brossoit, and I feel like the sole reason would be maybe to spark the team, and maybe you get a bit of a different look. But I'd go more so on the biggest benefit would be sparking the team, because sometimes when you change the goaltender, I don't know, you play in front of maybe your backup with more urgency, maybe it changes the mindset a bit. But yeah, I feel like the defensive details need to be better, because Hellebuck, if you want to hate on him, sure, but I think he's made a lot of key saves in this series for this Winnipeg Jets team. And without him, honestly, in game number 3, when Colorado started to press, they could have put up a lot more goals. Like, there's not many goaltenders that are going to save the amount of chances that Colorado's been putting up against the Winnipeg Jets, right? Like, Carey Price, for example, against the Tampa Bay Lightning, a offensive juggernaut, was allowing in a lot of goals. I know Stanley Cup Finals, and this is the first round, but just saying, like, you could be a great goaltender, an elite goaltender, a Vezina level goaltender, and still struggle if you're going up against a team that's absolutely hemming you in, creaming you on the offensive side of the puck. When you're supposed to be an elite level defensive team, they got to start playing like one. But in terms of the lineup changes, I like how I guess trying something different. Actually, Onsen Fialbi is, I guess, similar to a player like Morgan Barron, where you're looking for them to bring in that same type of intensity and that energy. But I can't help thinking that why not try Cole Perfetti in this lineup, a player that was top 7 in points this season, a player that showed signs of consistency when he was given a shot in the top 6 to get the Jets' 8-game win streak going. He ends up putting in 2 goals, I believe, having 1 assist as well. So, I do get it. This is playoff hockey, old school mindset where you're thinking get some energy, some physicality in there with a big body. But Cole Perfetti, I feel like hasn't had the trust of this coaching staff, and these playoffs are another great example. Logan Stanley coming into the lineup, a player that was scratched last game for Brendan Dillon, who of course can't go. Logan Stanley hasn't played fantastic in these playoffs. He hasn't been atrocious, but he hasn't played fantastic. I think the Jets are in a spot now too where Colin Miller, you can't really rely on him to play because you didn't play him enough in the lineup in the season to really get him going. So I feel like the Jets put themselves in a spot there. I think Colin Miller should be in the lineup. I guess bringing in the energy of Nate Schmidt, a character guy who honestly didn't look too bad in game number 3, is not a bad move by Bonus. He made it last game, but yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see a Stanley Schmidt pairing this afternoon. Dylan Sandberg has not been the greatest in these playoffs, but he played a bit better in game number 3. Paired with Neil Pionk, that's going to be a really interesting pairing. This decor needs to be carried by this Josh Morrissey and Dylan DeMello tandem today. Dylan DeMello needs to raise his game. I think the second line needs to raise their game for this Winnipeg Jets team. And yeah, honestly, in terms of special teams, like, it's the discipline factor once again. I don't think the penalty kill has looked awful for the Jets. They killed off 4 out of 6 in game number 3. Hellebuck's made some huge saves on the penalty kill. It's just the amount of penalties you take. You give Colorado 6 chances, they're going to score on at least 1 or 2 of those chances, right? But in terms of the power play, like, I've liked some of the stuff that they've been doing. The movement that they've had, they've been able to score on it consistently throughout this series. And yeah, I mean, you take a look at how it was in the regular season, it looked way more stagnant than it does now. So that is a bright side. It's about how the second line gets going today. They're with each other for another game. They started to play, I think, better hockey last game, their best game of the series. It's just you got to give them more ice time if you want to get the full effects out of it. And maybe you give your first line that objectively has been the best for the Jets, even though I hated on it quite a bit. Like, they've stepped up their game, I feel like, Mark Scheifele and Cal Connor, compared to the rest of the players on this Jets forward group. So yeah, it's about that second line getting going to give this team more scoring depth in these playoffs, to allow for this Jets offense to shine where it can the best, which was scoring by committee this season. Can they start getting the goals from that second line? Does the third line start scoring and get it going today? We know how huge that Adam Lowry can be in the playoffs. And that line has been so good at providing energy for the Jets this season, so we shall see. I think I'm going to like the game of actually Onsen Fialbi today. I think he'll be looking to make an impact and looking to hit. But yeah, I mean, going back to the original point of what the Jets need to do to extend this series, they need to shore up their defensive zone details because they're an elite defensive team. They rely so much on that, especially 5-on-5, and I think that needs to be up another level. The discipline factor won't get into that, and your star players, your best players up front, need to start elevating their game, like the players like Arteri Lehkonen and Valery Nichushkin have on that second line for this Colorado Avalanche team. And those guys are proven players in the playoffs. For this Winnipeg Jets team, there's question marks of, is this team actually for real? So far, the haters of the Winnipeg Jets being proven right in these playoffs. I think that in this game today, you need to get off to a fast start. Getting the first goal is huge, and honestly, as huge as the defensive details are you cannot sit back against Colorado. You need to keep coming at them and pressing on them. And the Jets, I believe, do have the skill to do that. Can they break out of their shell a bit and prove that they can do the work today offensively that they need? Rely on your forecheck cycle from low to high. That's been really good for you this season when you've been able to get on the forecheck and make a difference. But I'd like to see the transition game maybe changed up a bit from the Jets. Instead of flipping the puck as much, look for, more support breaking out and making quicker passes. I think that could be huge. But yeah, I think that, even though, like, taking a look at, I guess, the playoff stats so far for Colorado, haven't done that really today yet. Yeah, I mean, Nathan McKinnon, a goal and an assist last game. When taking a look at him, a player that the Jets need to shut down, right? Like, Nathan McKinnon's still a point per game player, but he's not putting up like 3-4 point games. He's putting up 2 multi-point games so far. Yeah, I mean, Colorado was the team I wanted. Honestly, I still prefer playing them in the first round, I guess, compared to a team like Dallas in some ways. In other ways, like, Colorado's speed has just been too much for the Jets to handle so far, like I've already talked about. But yeah, I mean, honestly, like, I guess I just neglected some things from Colorado when calling this series because, yeah, I mean, it's just proven that the regular season is it's way more it's different than the postseason, and I think we've been seeing that so far, in some of these series. But yeah, I'll talk about what the Jets, I believe, need to do, or not. I've already talked about that. I'll talk about my predictions for this series to end off this episode coming up, but we'll take a look around the playoffs, how the other series are going coming up. After this next transition, everybody, you're watching the Jet Fuel podcast here on G Show Productions on gshow.ca, 22 minutes away from puck drop at this point. Thanks for being with us, if you are. Welcome back to the Jet Fuel podcast, everybody. Thanks for being here if you are. Jets taking on the Avs for game number 4 in Colorado coming up here at 1:30 p.m. Central Time. We'll get into the rest of the playoffs coming up now and how things have truly been going. Yeah, two teams had a chance to eliminate their opponents yesterday but failed to do so. That was the Carolina Hurricanes and the Tampa Bay Lightning, both up 3-0. Tampa Bay with a really strong performance out of the gate, up 3-0 to start off the game. Florida makes it close, it's 4-3 at one point, and Tampa ends up winning that game 6-3. But yeah, I mean, overall in that series so far, it's just been the Florida Panthers getting big saves from Bobrovsky, showcasing some really good defensive play, showcasing that they can come through in the clutch moments. And for Tampa Bay, in game number 3, they end up having a goal that gets overturned. A good coaching challenge by Paul Maurice. Honestly, he's coached a well series. I will say that. I'm a huge Pomo hater, but gotta give the guy credit. Gotta give Florida credit. They're a great team. It's gonna be tough for, I think, Tampa to come back. I don't think this is the Tampa Bay Lightning of old. I picked against Florida truly for my bias against. I just don't want to see Paul Maurice win. I'll get into Paul Maurice one day in terms of my thoughts on him. But yeah, I mean Florida, no doubt about it. They're a stacked team. So deep up front, so much firepower, and Bobrovsky, man, he. It's been fantastic in the playoffs these last few years. But Tampa with a huge win to extend the series. I believe game number 5 of that series going on August 29th. So going tomorrow, which should be very entertaining. But as for the Carolina Hurricanes against the New York Islanders, New York just staying alive, and Carolina almost putting them away yesterday, coming back twice, I believe, or no, coming back once, down 2-1. Nason scoring a goal. Hooray for my fantasy, one of my fantasy leagues. I went heavy Carolina, but yeah, a great play by Bo Voracek. No, not by Bo Voracek, by Bo Horvat on the forecheck on the game-winning goal in OT to set things up. Bertuzzo from the point gets a shot in, and I believe he gets credited with the goal. It was either him or Matt Barzal, but I feel like, New York, it's just one of those teams that is shown to be pesky throughout the years. Interesting, Patrick Roy. I mean, I guess Sorokin hasn't been that great, and Varlamov has been better, and he ended up being pulled in game number 3. But Varlamov has been his guy. I think that the Islanders, just looking at the shots against, it's been Carolina that's been controlling that series for the most part in terms of the shots attempts by quite a bit, and I feel like they just got too much talent. They're back home, on home ice for game number 5 on Tuesday. I think Carolina probably wraps it up. As for the New York Rangers and the Washington Capitals, Washington has made these, games. They've stayed in these, but I think New York just has a bit too much. Playing each other tonight, I could very well see this being the sweep. It being the only sweep, I guess, of the Stanley Cup playoffs at this point. I just don't think Washington is good enough, and we've seen it in these games. New York has too much depth. They're too good overall, so give me the Rangers to sweep tonight. As for the Boston Bruins and the Toronto Maple Leafs, Toronto at times in this series has outplayed the Boston Bruins, but when you get as many power plays as they do, and when you're built on offense like this team is, scoring only 1 goal in game 1, then yes, scoring 3 goals in game number 2, where Austin Matthews was big time clutch with that game winner, and Toronto outplayed Boston in that game. You get compliments from Brad Marchand and saying that this is a different Leafs team, essentially. But yeah, game number 3 I think was huge, where the Leafs kind of let the emotions of the game once again, like we've seen with the missed calls, kind of take over. And yeah, they were bad missed calls, no doubt. Marchand, him taking down Bertuzzi, should have been called. But you got to continue playing the games. And for this Toronto group, they're an experienced group. You got to be mentally tough in the playoffs, and I feel like on the bench that is not a good look yesterday of those guys, no matter how they want to spin it. Getting frustrated, Marner throwing equipment. Nylander said something that I think it was like, this isn't effing junior anymore. That was something I saw from I forget what account on Instagram, but showing that it seems like the pressure, they're frustrated, and it's getting to them. For Toronto's sake, their stars, their core 4, or their core 5, if you include Morgan Riley in it, since he's been signed long term to some good money. They need to get things going. All of them play on the power play. They need to be better there. Hasn't looked very good. Boston seems like they've kind of figured them out, and Boston seems like they've kind of won the mental game right now at this point for Toronto. They got them frustrated. You're down 3-1, and if history tells us anything from the recent matchups and just the matchups in history against these two teams, it's been Boston that's had the has had the advantage, and definitely favorites to take home this series at this point. And Boston is having their players step up, right? Like Brad Marchand somehow avoiding penalties and also scoring big goals. Jake DeBrusk has been a Leaf killer once again in this series. And we're seeing Jeremy Swayman play really well and stymieing a Toronto team that is built on offense, playing some solid defense, but when your offense isn't going and there's so much invested in it, you got to start to wonder, is there going to be questions come this offseason, if any, for the Toronto Maple Leafs and the direction they're going if they fail to get through? Because it's great to score 69 goals. It's great to put up all these points. I know I sound like every single Leafs hater, but it's true. You can't come to play in the playoffs. This Bruins team doesn't have Bergeron anymore. They're not as deep up front. You're deeper up front in ways. You got more skill up front. You've gotten some solid defensive play. It's just up to the forwards now to get it going for Toronto. And clock could be striking midnight on their season very well if they don't soon. But as for the Western Conference, we'll get into the Jets series last. But yeah, we'll start off with the Vancouver Canucks and the Nashville Predators. Casey DeSmith coming through with a huge Game 3 performance to guide the Canucks to a 2-1 win. Shots have been low in this series, and honestly, it was Nashville who I feel outplayed the Vancouver Canucks in game number 3. Nashville, they let game 1 slip away. They were up 2-1. Vancouver scoring 3 unanswered. Dakota Joshua with a huge game. I've been hearing people saying pay him after that one. But yeah, Thatcher Demko, the big story in this matchup, out for the rest of the series since game number 1, and he's out indefinitely right now. Not sure when he'll be returning. The Canucks, of course, to give him the best chance to return, would have to, I believe, win this series against the Nashville Predators. But Casey DeSmith, a guy who honestly, I doubted. I felt like Vancouver was done after losing Thatcher Demko, and maybe they still are, because as good as Casey DeSmith played, you're thinking I'm thinking at least that you got UC Saros in net, a guy that is a top 5 goaltender in the league and a guy that can steal games, but that wasn't the case. Vancouver making good on their 2 opportunities that they scored on. And yeah, for this Vancouver Canucks team, a team that a lot of people are doubting, going up against a team in Nashville where you could make the argument that's a wildcard team that you did not want to play if you played them, because they were 16-0-2 in their last 18 games at one point late in the regular season, right? But I feel like that series is far from over. I could very well see it going 6, honestly. Depending on if, Nashville's their guys can show up, right, in terms of, UC Saros actually being that guy, which, he only allowed 2 goals, but for the amount that you outshot Vancouver on that's pretty disappointing to lose that way. So, yeah, game number 5, or game number 4, going to be played in Nashville once again, and it's a huge one for Nashville because you go down 3-1. That's a recipe for a really tough comeback, honestly, no matter what the history says. I think the odds are pretty good if you're up 3-1 for the team that's up to close it out. But as for the other wildcard team, those darn Vegas Golden Knights screwing up my playoff bracket potentially and my playoff pools. And yeah, last night, what a thriller of a game. Had a chance to watch it, and I thought that Vegas was going to do it again and go up 3-0, but what an absolute snipe by Wyatt Johnston. He had 2 goals in that matchup in the 3-2 win for Dallas last night in OT. And yeah, he's going to be a stud for years to come. This Dallas team is going to be really good for years to come with the core that they've built. No matter the outcome of this series, I believe Dallas is going to be back next year. But as for this first round matchup, I feel like it was the one that Stars fans and the Stars probably didn't want. Everyone is so good in the Western Conference this season. I'd say that it is the strongest conference overall out of the 2 this season in the NHL, which is kind of nice to see that flipping again because it's been the East for the past few years. But Vegas has had Dallas's number this season. They beat them in the conference finals last year, and at one point it was kind of seeming like this could be a conference finals matchup again this year. But these 2 teams play each other in the first round, And man, in the first two games, like Dallas was outchancing them. They were controlling the majority of the play. It's just you could see the puck luck wasn't there for them, and once Vegas ended up getting the lead, striking quick like they showed in those games, really not breaking mentally, they would start to lock things down more defensively. And yesterday it was all Stars dominating, their most dominating performance to boot or to date. Sorry. Um, and Vegas, they get life with two quick goals, one shorthanded, and they start to pile up the shots. But what was so huge for Dallas yesterday was, even though Jake Ottinger, let in two of those quick goals, I feel like his angle wasn't the best on that Eichel shot, and Eichel saw the opening and sniped it so quickly there. But Ottinger really did settle down, and yeah, I mean, it was an absolute battle between these two teams. It's been like a heavyweight bout throughout the first three games, but it's Dallas who's had most of the pressure, most of the control of the play in that series. As for the Vegas Golden Knights, they're playing a really great defensive structure, making it tough for Dallas to break into the inside and getting sticks on Dallas's sticks when they're trying to get chances on net, and oftentimes even forcing them to miss the net, miss those opportunities where they're trying to go backdoor. And yeah, I mean, these are two teams that are so good defensively. Honestly, I said that I'd rather play Vegas than Dallas. I'd rather play none of those teams if I'm moving through, if I'm the Winnipeg Jets, if they are able to. But last night was a huge win for the Dallas Stars. If you go down 3-0, the series is essentially over. They're the best road team in the NHL this season, so you got to feel like, even though you're going into such a hostile environment in Vegas, you got to feel confident still with the group you've had, the level of play you've had on the road. So that was a huge win for the Dallas Stars. Expect for another close game, most likely coming up for game number 4, which will be, let's see here, I believe tomorrow at 8:30 p.m. And yeah, in my opinion, Dallas has looked like the better team for most of that series, but Vegas has just been so good at taking away the middle of the ice, defending, pressuring the Dallas Stars. Uh, you know, when they're in certain parts of the ice, and as well as just really good defensive sticks and taking away, stripping the Dallas Stars players of the puck. But Dallas can build off of last night. Maybe one is all they need. They able to come back and at least make that series go the distance to 7 games. But as for the Edmonton Oilers and the LA Kings, series that I haven't honestly paid that much attention to in terms of watching it as often and as much as the other series so far. But Edmonton with a huge display of offense in game number 1 and in game number 3, 6-1, their best win of the playoffs so far against the LA Kings. But yeah, LA proving that they're gonna fight in this series. Expect honestly for LA to at least come out, I mean, strong in game number 4. I could very well see it, which is going to be played tonight at 9:30 p.m. Central Time. But yeah, it was the LA Kings who, showed that they could beat this Edmonton team at least one game. A lot of people were saying sweep after the first game. I know I was thinking, if it continues to go this way, if Edmonton continues to get this type of opportunity to unload offensively, it could very well be that way. But yeah, LA got some huge saves in game number 2. And LA's guys like Kopitar, Kempe, Doughty scoring for the first time since 2014, it was said. Those guys really stepped up, and those guys showcasing what type of playoff experience they have and how it can be used to this team's benefit. Talbot, of course, making some huge saves in that one. But it was the Edmonton Oilers, of course, in that third game. So we pull up the stats, like their top guys just showing out once again. Zach Hyman with 6 goals in the playoffs now, a 2-goal game in game 3, a hat trick in game number 1. McDavid Scoring only his first of the playoffs, but he's been lighting up assist-wise. Leon Draisaitl continuing to put up the points in these playoffs, and he's scored twice, having 3 goals in the playoffs now. Evan Bouchard is continuing to make such an impact from the back end in these playoffs for Edmonton too. So yeah, it's just for Edmonton, like they have the experience and I feel like the mental aspect in terms of the advantage of those aspects of the game against this LA Kings team. They beat them 2 years in a row, and you could argue that this Edmonton team is as deep as any as they've had in the past in the McDavid era, and you could make the argument that this LA team is the worst that LA has had in these past 3 years based on, how they kind of played and finished this season. Even though they end up finishing third place in the Pacific, it's just the additions that LA made haven't been the difference makers for them, like a Pierre-Luc Dubois, right, that they added in. So yeah, I feel like Edmonton, this series goes no more than 6 games, in my opinion. I could see them finishing it off in 5, but I could see LA because they're pesky. They're a team that plays a stingy type of style at 1-3-1. If they can elevate their game for one of these, maybe they make it interesting. But yeah, it's looking like Edmonton's going to advance through. I'd say in 5 games, or we'll go 5-6. Ending off with the Winnipeg Jets and the Colorado Avalanche. I've already touched on this series. I'll be honest with you. I think the Winnipeg Jets are in trouble if this game is a replica of how they've played in the past 3 games. They need to dig deep. I'm going to drop some curse words here. Fuck the stats. Fuck everything else. You got to bear down and dig deep. I know it's one of the biggest sports cliches out there, but it's true. You got to reach deep within yourself to find another level. You got to act. You got to play like these last 2 games, especially this one today is the last game of your professional career. And if you don't win this game, or if you don't give your 110% effort, there is no tomorrow for you. Going down 3-1 to the Colorado Avalanche with how good they've been at home, it is going to be so tough for the Winnipeg Jets, even if they come back to home ice, because they haven't been that dominant on home ice in the playoffs. It's just, this is a must win today, and the Jets need to find their best effort of the season. There's no other way to spin it. They've improved their 5-on-5 play, as you've seen in this episode, but your best players have to come to play. Nikolai Ehlers has not been up to Nikolai Ehlers' levels in these playoffs. He has the reputation in these playoffs of, in his playoff career, of being a ghost. I feel like he's been playing better and better each game, but he's got to step up today. This is coming from like his number one supporter. I am an Ehlers stan, you could call me that, but he needs to play better. I think Hellebuyck needs to raise his level even more. Everyone needs to raise their level, even though I don't think Hellebuyck has been the main problem or even close to being one of the biggest problems for this team. But you need to, like I said, shore up defensively, as well as try to stay more disciplined, as we talked about. And your best players in your top 6 need to raise their level, because the Avalanche's top 6 has raised their level. Their best players have been their best players. They've found ways to adjust as this series has gone along. Georgiev has started to settle in, as we've seen. I think that more shots, just throw anything you can at the net, could be a strategy for the Jets. But at the same time, no matter who's in net, you need to crash the net, get bodies in front to screen, and get rebounds, which, the Winnipeg Jets, I feel like, made more of an emphasis on doing in game number 3 with the 14 high danger scoring chances. That needs to continue in this one. But, it's been 3 games so far, and like I've talked about, if it honestly wasn't for Georgiev laying a stinker in game number 1, the Jets could be facing a sweep today. The 3 games, honestly, Jets fans, that the Jets have had so far against Colorado doesn't point towards this team winning today unless they can raise their level. And if they don't raise their level, nothing else is really going to matter. They've proven that they've had stints against Colorado where they've been able to outplay them for periods of time in this playoff series, but as we saw, the wheels fell off. The Jets started getting frustrated, taking more and more penalties. And we saw Colorado really won in the mental aspect of that game and, essentially ended up outplaying the Jets because of it again in the end, in that third period where they exploded for 4 goals. So, yeah, or I guess 5 goals with the empty netter that they had, or I don't even know. I don't even remember if it was an empty netter, but right now it's looking like 5 or 6 for Colorado. I know about a week ago I had the Winnipeg Jets winning this one in 6, but if I'm going to be honest, it's looking like Colorado in 6 games, or in 5 or 6, I'd say. But yeah, I think that, certain players on this team need to have a big game. We all know Rick Bowness is going to continue to play Neil Pionk, so we just got to pray that Dylan Sandberg can step up his game as well and help carry the load on that decor. And maybe Neil Pionk steps up. Maybe this is the game where everyone starts to turn around for the Winnipeg Jets team. But they got to actually prove it. And it starts with a really strong start to this one, and you got to carry through that play through a consistent 60 minutes for as long and as strong as you can. But yeah, that's going to do it, everybody. The Jets game taking on the Colorado Avalanche for Game 4 today, starting up right now. Pretty much, it's 1:32 currently. Thank you for tuning in. If you did to this episode, we'll take a look if there were any comments on the live stream. There wasn't. If you are catching this episode afterwards and you want to catch a live stream of this podcast, we're going to be going live again, most likely Saturday. Next Saturday, most likely, we'll be going live, but could be going live depending on the mood, maybe on Wednesday. Maybe on Wednesday we'll be back. Or maybe even on Tuesday. I don't know yet. Just stay tuned on our social media pages on gshow Productions. Pretty much type that in anywhere and you'll be able to find us. We mainly have been posting on Instagram and on X, formerly known as Twitter, but we'll be posting on Facebook and TikTok most likely more so next season. A lot in store for next year that I'm really excited about, but staying in the present for this episode, if you want to catch the latest episodes of the Jet Fuel podcast and the newest ones when they come out, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future uploads of our official Winnipeg Jets podcast here on G-Show Productions. Want to thank you for tuning in once again. Want to thank Make Hand Fasteners and Tools Terraco and Goaltenders for sponsoring another edition of the show. The MMJHL podcast, the Season 1 finale, which is the Manitoba Major Junior Hockey League podcast, will be coming out tonight, this evening, probably at 7 p.m. around there, so stay tuned for that. We'll be putting out our announcement on our social media pages on Instagram and X coming up in just a bit here. But Jets Nation, I'm going to take off now. Catch this game. Go Jets, go. Hopefully they can turn things around here and get things going and shift this series back into their favor. Stay tuned. We'll most likely post on our website as well when the next edition of this episode is coming out, or of this podcast is coming out, when the next edition of it is. But yeah, I'm going to take off now, everybody. We'll let Nico Feniak take you away with the official outro of the Jet Fuel podcast. See ya in the next few days or sometime next weekend, most likely on Saturday if it is next weekend, for episode 19. Thanks for watching again, everybody. Take care.